I was already 15 minutes late when I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home in Evanston, the engine of my beat-up Honda Civic sputtering like it was apologizing for my existence. Through the living room window, I could see the formal dining table set with my mother's good china, the one she only brought out when Dad's colleagues came over. Tonight was one of those nights. My phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. "Dude, just tell them about the startup already. What's the worst that could happen?" Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I almost laughed. Marcus had never sat through a Kim family dinner. He'd never watched my father's face contort with disappointment every time I spoke. He'd never seen my mother's practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes when she introduced me to guests as our Jordan, in the same tone she might use to describe a persistent stain on the carpet. The front door opened before I could knock. Grace stood there in her perfectly pressed blazer, her expression a mixture of relief and warning. "Where were you?" she whispered, stepping aside to let me in. "Dad's been checking his watch every 5 minutes." "Sorry, I was working on that computer thing again?" Her tone wasn't mocking, just tired. Grace had given up trying to understand my projects years ago, the same way she'd given up trying to defend me at family gatherings. Self-preservation, she called it. I could hear voices from the dining room, my father's booming laugh, my mother's gentle murmur, and a deeper voice I didn't recognize, the mystery guest. Dad had mentioned someone important would be joining us tonight, but he'd been deliberately vague about who. "Jordan, ah." My mother's voice carried that particular mix of affection and anxiety that meant she was performing for company. Come, we're just about to start." I straightened my wrinkled button-down shirt and followed Grace into the dining room. My father sat at the head of the table in his usual spot, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled, his eyes scanning me with the same expression he might use to evaluate a disappointing quarterly report. My mother bustled around, serving banchan, her movements quick and nervous. And there, sitting in what should have been my usual chair, was a man I'd never seen before. He was older, maybe 60, with kind eyes and an expensive suit that didn't quite hide his relaxed posture. He looked up as I entered, and for a moment I felt like he was actually seeing me, not just looking through me the way most of Dad's colleagues did. "This is my son Jordan," my father said, his voice carrying that particular weight that meant he was about to say something cutting. "Jordan, this is Mr. Levi Hammond, my boss at Midwest Logistics." Mr. Hammond stood and extended his hand. His grip was firm but not aggressive, and when he smiled, it felt genuine. "Nice to meet you, Jordan. Your father's told me a lot about you." I glanced at Dad, wondering what exactly he'd shared. Probably nothing good. "Jordan's still figuring things out," my father continued, settling back into his chair. 28 years old and still playing around with computers like a teenager. The familiar sting hit my chest, but I kept my expression neutral. This was how it always started, the small cuts that would build throughout the evening until I was bleeding from 1,000 tiny wounds. "Actually," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady, "I've been working on a logistics optimization platform that—" "Logistics?" My father's laugh was sharp. "You think you understand logistics? You've never worked a real day in your life." The room went quiet except for the soft clink of my mother setting down the rice pot with trembling hands. Grace stared at her plate, and I felt the familiar heat of shame creeping up my neck. But Mr. Hammond was watching me with those kind eyes, and something in his expression made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as invisible as I'd always believed. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of forced conversation and my father's increasingly pointed remarks. By the time my mother served dessert, her famous green tea ice cream, I was ready to disappear into the floor. Grace had tried twice to steer the conversation away from my lack of direction, but Dad seemed determined to catalog every way I'd disappointed the family in front of Mr. Hammond. "Jordan's always been a dreamer," my father said, spooning ice cream with theatrical precision. "Never practical, never realistic. I keep telling him he needs to find a real job, something stable, but he insists on wasting time with these projects." The word projects dripped with such disdain that I actually flinched. Mr. Hammond had been quiet through most of the meal, asking polite questions about Grace's law practice and complimenting my mother's cooking, but I could feel his eyes on me whenever my father launched into another critique. "What kind of projects?" Mr. Hammond asked quietly. I looked up, surprised. No one ever asked follow-up questions about my work. My father waved dismissively. "Computer nonsense. He thinks he's going to build some kind of business application." I told him if he wants to work in business, he should start at the bottom like everyone else. Learn the fundamentals. After dessert, as the adults moved to the living room for coffee, I escaped to the back patio. The October air was crisp, and I could hear the distant hum of traffic from the interstate. I was checking my phone, thinking about calling Marcus for moral support, when the sliding door opened behind me. "Mind if I join you?" Mr. Hammond stepped outside, closing the door gently behind him. Up close, away from the formal dining room, he looked less like a corporate executive and more like someone's thoughtful uncle. "I wanted to talk to you about your project," he said, settling against the patio railing. "The logistics optimization platform." I blinked. "You were listening?" "I was, and I have to say, Jordan, your father doesn't know what he's talking about." He pulled out his phone, swiping through what looked like a messaging app. "Tell me, have you ever heard of the username L_Hammond_mentor on the Tech Forward Accelerator platform?" My blood went cold. L_Hammond_mentor had been my anonymous mentor for over a year, the one person who actually understood my vision, who'd guided me through every technical challenge and business decision. The person who'd believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. That's you?" He smiled, and suddenly I understood why his eyes had seemed so familiar. "I've been watching your progress, Jordan. Your platform isn't just good, it's revolutionary. The beta testing metrics you shared last month were incredible. A 43% improvement in delivery efficiency for small businesses? That's not computer nonsense. That's the future." I stared at him, my mind reeling. "But why didn't you tell me? Why the secrecy?" "Because I wanted to see who you really were, without the pressure of knowing I was your father's boss. And what I've seen is remarkable." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "Jordan, I'm launching a new tech startup. I need someone who understands both the technical side and the business applications. Someone with vision and drive." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "I want you to be the CEO." I stared at Mr. Hammond Levi for what felt like an eternity. The words, "I want you to be the CEO," echoed in my head like a broken record. This had to be some kind of joke, or maybe a test. People like me didn't become CEOs. We stayed in the shadows, grateful for whatever scraps of validation we could find. I don't understand," I stammered. "You barely know me. You've never seen me lead anything." "Jordan, I've been watching you lead for a year. Every decision you've made on the platform, every problem you've solved, every time you've helped other entrepreneurs in the forum, that's leadership. You just haven't been in a position where anyone acknowledged it." Through the sliding glass door, I could see my father gesturing animatedly as he talked to Grace, probably recounting some business triumph. My mother was clearing coffee cups with that same nervous energy she'd had all evening. "My father would never understand," I said quietly. "This isn't about your father." Levi's voice was firm but kind. "This is about you. About what you've already built, and what you could build with proper resources and support." I thought about the late nights I'd spent coding, the weekends lost to debugging, the constant voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like my father telling me I was wasting my time. But I also thought about the messages from beta users, small business owners who'd told me my platform had saved them hours of work and thousands of dollars. "I need to think about it," I said finally. "Of course. But Jordan," he handed me a business card, "don't think too long. Great opportunities don't wait for perfect timing." An hour later, I sat across from Marcus at Mel's Diner, our usual late-night spot when life got too complicated. He was on his third cup of coffee, listening to me explain the entire surreal evening. "Let me get this straight," he said, leaning back in the cracked vinyl booth. Your dad's boss, who's apparently some kind of billionaire, has been your secret mentor for a year and just offered to make you CEO of a startup. That's the summary, yeah. And you're sitting here looking like someone just told you you have 6 months to live because I picked at my untouched burger. Because what if I'm not ready? What if I fail? What if my father was right about me all along? Marcus reached across the table and flicked my forehead. Dude, stop. You've been ready for this your whole life. You just needed someone to see it. But what if? Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. No. His voice was sharp. You know what's going to happen if you don't take this? You're going to spend the rest of your life working some dead-end job, wondering what if. And your dad's going to keep treating you like you're worthless because you'll keep acting like you believe him. I looked out the window at the empty parking lot, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on the asphalt. Marcus was right. I'd been waiting my whole life for permission to be myself, for someone to tell me I was good enough. But maybe permission wasn't something you waited for. Maybe it was something you took. I want full autonomy, I said suddenly. If I'm going to do this, I do it my way. Marcus grinned. Now you're talking. I walked into the house the next evening, with Levi's signed offer letter in my jacket pocket. My parents were in the kitchen, my father reading the Chicago Tribune, while my mother prepared dinner. The familiar smell of kimchi jjigae filled the air, but my stomach was too knotted to feel hungry. Where were you last night? My father asked without looking up. You disappeared after dinner. I was talking to Mr. Hammond. I took a breath, feeling the paper crinkle against my chest. Dad, I need to tell you something. My mother looked up from the stove, her wooden spoon suspended mid-stir. Something in my tone must have alerted her because she turned down the heat and gave me her full attention. Mr. Hammond offered me a job, I said. CEO of a tech startup he's funding. The newspaper crumpled in my father's hands. What? He's been mentoring me online for over a year. He knows my work, he believes in the platform I've built, and he thinks I can lead a team. My father stood so abruptly his chair scraped against the tile floor. This is ridiculous. Levi's being polite because he feels sorry for you. You think you can just skip every step, avoid paying your dues? I'm not skipping anything. I've been working on this for 3 years. Playing around on your computer is not work. His voice was rising, and I could see the vein in his forehead that always appeared when he was truly angry. You have no experience, no credentials, no understanding of how business actually works. Maybe I understand it better than you think. The words came out harder than I intended, and I saw my father's eyes widen with surprise. What did you say to me? My mother stepped between us, her hands raised in a peacemaking gesture. Please, both of you. No, Mom. For the first time in my life, I didn't back down. I'm tired of being told I'm not good enough. I'm tired of being treated like I'm some kind of failure because I don't want to follow the exact path Dad laid out. You ungrateful. My father's face was red now. Everything I've done, every sacrifice I've made was to give you opportunities, and this is how you repay me? By letting my boss manipulate you into thinking you're something you're not? Maybe I am something you never bothered to see. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's eyes filled with tears, and I could hear Grace's footsteps on the stairs. She must have heard the shouting. If you take this job, my father said, his voice deadly quiet, you're choosing to disrespect this family. You're choosing to be selfish. I'm choosing to be myself. Grace appeared in the doorway, still in her work clothes. She looked between us, reading the tension immediately. What's going on? Your brother thinks he's going to be a CEO, my father said with bitter sarcasm. Grace's eyebrows shot up. Really? Grace, tell him this is insane. Tell him he needs to be realistic. But Grace didn't say what he expected. Instead, she looked at me with something I'd never seen before. Respect. Do it, she said quietly. Don't end up like me. The River North co-working space was nothing like the sterile corporate offices I'd imagined. Exposed brick walls, mismatched furniture, and the constant hum of coffee machines and animated conversations. I stood in the lobby at 8:47 a.m., 13 minutes early because I'd been too nervous to sleep and had arrived downtown way too soon. "Jordan?" A woman approached me, extending her hand with crisp efficiency. She was about my age, with short auburn hair and the kind of confident posture that suggested she'd never spent a day doubting herself. "I'm Claire Voss, head of product. Levi told me to expect you." Quote. Her handshake was firm, professional, and somehow managed to convey that she was reserving judgment about whether I deserved to be here. "Nice to meet you," I said, hoping my voice sounded steadier than I felt. She led me through a maze of standing desks and beanbag chairs to a glass-walled conference room where 3 other people were waiting. The lean startup team Levi had mentioned, a back-end developer named Sam, a UX designer called Maya, and a data analyst who introduced himself as Dev. "So," Claire said, settling into her chair and opening a laptop, "Levi says you're going to lead us through the next phase of development." I have to admit, I was expecting someone with more traditional experience. There it was, the polite version of what my father had been saying for years. I felt the familiar urge to apologize, to make myself smaller, but Marcus's voice echoed in my head. "You've been ready for this your whole life." "I understand your concern," I said, taking the seat at the head of the table, a position that felt foreign and terrifying. "But I think experience comes in different forms. I've been building logistics optimization tools for 3 years, working with real clients, solving actual problems." "Levi mentioned you have some beta testing data?" Sam asked, looking genuinely curious. I pulled out my laptop, grateful to be on familiar ground. For the next 20 minutes, I walked them through the platform, the user feedback, the efficiency metrics. I watched their expressions shift from skepticism to interest, and when Maya started asking technical questions about the algorithm, I felt something I'd never experienced before, professional respect. But as the morning wore on, that initial confidence began to crack. During our product roadmap discussion, Claire challenged every decision I made. When I suggested prioritizing mobile optimization, she countered with data showing desktop usage trends. When I proposed adding new features, Dev questioned whether we had the resources. By lunch, I was second-guessing everything. Was I being too aggressive, too passive? Was I supposed to make unilateral decisions or build consensus? Every choice felt loaded with the possibility of proving my father right. "You okay?" Sam asked as we grabbed sandwiches from the cafe downstairs. "You look like you're about to throw up." "Just wondering if I'm cut out for this," I admitted. "Imposter syndrome," Maya said matter-of-factly. "We all get it. The difference is, most people fake it till they make it. You actually know what you're talking about." The clash came 3 days later during our weekly strategy meeting. Claire had prepared a detailed presentation arguing that we should pivot our entire approach, focusing on enterprise clients instead of small businesses. "The revenue potential is 10 times higher," she said, clicking through slides of market analysis. "Small businesses are great for user feedback, but they can't sustain a growth trajectory that investors expect." I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't just a business disagreement. It was an attack on everything I'd built. The platform existed because I'd seen how small logistics companies struggled with inefficiencies that big corporations could easily solve with expensive software. "I understand the numbers," I said carefully, "but we'd be abandoning our core mission." "Mission doesn't pay salaries," Claire shot back. "We need to be realistic about market forces." The word realistic hit me like a physical blow. How many times had my father used that exact word to dismiss my ideas? I could feel the old pattern starting, the retreat, the self-doubt, the urge to defer to someone who seemed more confident. "I need some time to think," I said, and immediately hated how weak it sounded. I spent the rest of the day holed up in the small office Levi had given me, staring at user testimonials from our beta clients. A bakery in Milwaukee that had cut delivery costs by 30%. A boutique in Portland that could now track inventory in real time. These weren't just statistics. They were real people whose businesses I'd helped save. Around 9 p.m., as the co-working space emptied out, Marcus showed up with takeout containers and his usual grin. "Heard you had a rough day," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Claire called you realistic yet?" "How did you—" "Because I know you, man, and I know that look. You're spiraling because someone challenged your vision, and now you're wondering if maybe your dad was right about everything." I picked at the pad thai he'd brought, my appetite gone. What if she's right? What if I'm being naive about the market? "Okay, let's say she is right about the money," Marcus said. "So what? Since when did you care about being the next unicorn startup? You built this thing because you wanted to help people like your uncle's restaurant, like my mom's cleaning service. People who can't afford enterprise solutions but still deserve good tools." He was right. I'd gotten so caught up in trying to be a real CEO that I'd forgotten why I started building the platform in the first place. The next morning, I walked into the conference room with a new presentation. Not charts and projections, but stories. Real case studies from our users, data showing how our current approach was creating measurable impact, and a roadmap that proved we could grow sustainably while staying true to our mission. "We're not pivoting," I announced. "We're doubling down, but we're going to do it smarter." For the first time since I'd started, Claire smiled. "Now that," she said, "sounds like leadership." The text came on a Thursday afternoon while I was reviewing user acquisition metrics. "Jordan, we need to talk." "Dinner tonight. 7 p.m. Morton's Steakhouse." "Dad." I stared at the message, my stomach dropping. We hadn't spoken since the blow-up 2 weeks ago. Grace had texted a few times with updates. Mom was worried. Dad was processing, the usual family code for simmering rage. But Morton's Steakhouse? That was Dad's power restaurant, where he took important clients. This wasn't going to be a casual family reconciliation. I arrived 15 minutes early, nervous energy making me pace the lobby. My father appeared exactly at 7, dressed in his best suit, his expression unreadable. He'd always been good at poker faces during business negotiations. "Jordan," he said, offering a handshake instead of a hug, "you look well." The conversation started safely. Questions about my apartment, the weather, how Grace was handling her latest case. Dad ordered the ribeye. I went with salmon, and for a moment it almost felt normal. Then the waiter left, and his mask slipped. "I've been reading about your little company," he said, cutting his steak with surgical precision. TechCrunch mentioned Levi's investment. Very impressive. There was something off about his tone, too smooth, too practiced. "Thank you," I said carefully. "I have to admit, I may have underestimated your potential." He paused, meeting my eyes. "I'm proud of what you've accomplished." The words I'd waited my entire life to hear, and they felt wrong, hollow, like he was reading from a script. "Dad, what's this really about?" He smiled, the same smile he used on difficult clients. "I have a proposition. Your platform could integrate beautifully with our logistics network. Think about it. The Kim family, working together, building something bigger than either of us could achieve alone." My blood went cold. "You want to merge our companies?" "I want to give you a chance to be part of something established, something with real infrastructure and client relationships. You'd maintain your CEO title, of course, but with the backing of Midwest Logistics." "And you'd be?" "Chairman of the board, advisor. Someone to help guide you through the complexities of scaling a business." There it was, the real offer. He wanted to absorb my company, put himself in charge, and reduce me back to the role I'd always played, the son who needed his father's guidance. "I appreciate the offer," I said, setting down my fork, "but I'm going to pass." His face hardened, the practiced warmth evaporating. "You're making a mistake, Jordan. You think Levi's going to protect you forever. Business is brutal. You need family." "I need family that believes in me," I said, standing up, "not family that wants to control me." "If you walk away from this table," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "don't expect to come crawling back when reality hits." I pulled out my wallet and left enough cash to cover my meal. I guess we'll see who's being realistic. As I walked toward the exit, I heard him call after me, "You're still that same worthless kid, Jordan. Success doesn't change who you really are. But for the first time in my life, I didn't believe him. The anonymous blog post appeared on Tech Insider 3 days after my dinner with Dad. The headline read, "Chicago startup CEO's hidden past raises questions about leadership experience." I discovered it, and Sam burst into my office at 8 a.m., laptop in hand and panic in his eyes. "Jordan, you need to see this," he said, setting the screen in front of me. The article was a masterclass in character assassination disguised as investigative journalism. It detailed my lack of formal business education, questioned whether I'd inflated user metrics, and included quotes from anonymous sources familiar with the company, suggesting I was unstable and unprepared for leadership. The worst part was how much of it was technically true, just stripped of all context and presented in the most damaging light possible. "This is bullshit," Maya said, reading over my shoulder. "Half these facts are completely twisted." My phone started buzzing immediately. Texts from Grace, Marcus, even my mother. But the call that made my stomach drop came from one of our potential investors. "Jordan, we need to discuss the article," Mr. Richardson said without preamble. "The board is concerned about the optics. Perhaps we should postpone the next funding round until this blows over." By noon, 2 more investors had called with similar concerns. Claire found me in the break room, staring at my untouched coffee. "Talk to me," she said, settling into the chair across from me. "And don't say you're fine, because you look like you're about to implode." "My father did this," I said quietly. "I can't prove it, but I know it was him. The timing, the sources, it all fits." "Okay, so what are we going to do about it?" "We?" Claire's expression softened. "Jordan, I was skeptical of you at first. I thought Levi was making a sentimental choice. But these past few weeks, watching you lead, seeing how you handle pressure and make decisions, you're the real deal. Some anonymous hit piece doesn't change that. The investors don't seem to agree. Then we show them they're wrong." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling our PR contact. We're going to get ahead of this with facts, testimonials from real users, and transparency about our actual metrics. What if it's not enough? Then we find investors who care more about results than rumors." That afternoon, Marcus appeared with takeout and moral support, followed by Levi, who'd flown back from New York after seeing the article. "This is what happens when you threaten people who are used to being in control," Levi said, settling into my office chair with the calm authority that made him successful. "Your father is scared, Jordan, scared that you're proving him wrong about everything. He's trying to destroy my reputation. He's trying to drag you back down to his level." Levi leaned forward. "But here's the thing about reputation. It's not built on what people say about you. It's built on what you do when they're trying to tear you down." The next morning, I published a response on our company blog. Not a defensive rant, but a transparent breakdown of our actual metrics, our mission, and the real stories behind our success. Claire had compiled testimonials from every satisfied client, and Dev had created visualizations showing our genuine impact. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Other entrepreneurs shared their own stories of being underestimated. Tech journalists began questioning the ethics of the original article. By the end of the week, 2 new investors had reached out, explicitly mentioning my transparency as a reason they wanted to work with us. "Still think your father was right about you?" Claire asked, watching me read the positive coverage. "No," I said, and for the first time I meant it completely. The event space at the Chicago Innovation Hub buzzed with nervous energy. 2 months after the sabotage attempt, we were finally ready to launch the full platform publicly. Local business owners mingled with tech journalists, investors chatted with potential clients, and somewhere in the crowd, I spotted at least 3 competitors trying to look casual while taking notes. "You ready for this?" Claire asked, adjusting my tie with the kind of casual intimacy that had developed between us over late nights debugging code and early mornings preparing presentations. "Define ready," I said, watching the crowd through the backstage curtain. My hands were shaking slightly, the same way they had before every speech in high school. Except now there were actual consequences riding on my performance. Ready means you know this platform better than anyone in that room, she said firmly. Ready means you've solved real problems for real people. Ready means you're about to show everyone what we've built together. Marcus appeared beside us, grinning and slightly out of breath. Dude, there are like 200 people out there. I saw the guy from TechCrunch, and I'm pretty sure that woman by the registration table is from VentureBeat. The introduction felt surreal. Levi took the stage first, his voice carrying easily through the space as he talked about innovation, entrepreneurship, and the future of logistics technology. Then he said the words I'd been waiting to hear. Please welcome the CEO and founder of LogiLink, Jordan Kim. The applause felt warm, genuine. I walked to the podium, looked out at the sea of faces, and for a moment, felt completely calm. 3 years ago, I began. I was working at my uncle's restaurant, watching him struggle with delivery schedules, inventory tracking, and vendor coordination. He had great food and loyal customers, but he was drowning in inefficiencies that big companies solve with million-dollar software packages. I clicked to the first slide, a photo of Uncle Min's restaurant. LogiLink exists because small businesses deserve the same tools as Fortune 500 companies. Not stripped-down versions, not good-enough solutions, but powerful, intuitive technology that actually understands how they work. The demo went flawlessly. Real-time tracking, automated scheduling, inventory optimization. Every feature we'd built came alive on the screen. I watched faces in the audience shift from polite interest to genuine engagement as they saw the platform solve actual problems. This isn't just software, I said as the presentation reached its conclusion. This is about empowering the businesses that form the backbone of our communities. The applause was thunderous. People stood. Phones came out for photos, and I felt something I'd never experienced before. Pure, uncomplicated pride in what I'd accomplished. As the crowd dispersed for networking, I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure near the back exit. My father, in his gray suit, watching from the shadows. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment, I saw something unexpected in his expression. Not pride exactly, but a kind of stunned recognition. He didn't approach. He didn't smile or nod. He simply turned and left. But for the first time in my life, I didn't need him to stay. 6 weeks after the launch, I walked down Michigan Avenue with Claire, the afternoon sun casting long shadows between the buildings. LogiLink had signed 43 new clients since the event, and we were already discussing Series A funding with investors who actually understood our vision. So Richardson wants to lead the round, Claire said, sipping her coffee as we strolled past the Art Institute. And the terms are better than anything we hoped for 6 months ago. Because we proved we could handle a crisis, I said. Funny how that works. She bumped my shoulder playfully. Funny how having a CEO who actually knows what he's doing works. We'd been spending more time together outside the office lately. Dinners that started as business meetings and stretched into conversations about everything except work. Walks like this one that had no agenda beyond enjoying each other's company. Neither of us had labeled what was happening between us, but it felt natural, unhurried, built on genuine respect and shared purpose. I need to stop by my mom's place, I said as we reached the corner where we usually parted ways. Everything okay? Yeah, I just have something to give her. An hour later, I sat in my mother's pristine living room, the same space where family dinners had become battlegrounds. She served tea with the same careful attention she'd always shown, but there was something different in her manner. Less nervous energy, more genuine warmth. Your father's been very quiet since your launch, she said, settling into her chair. I think he's processing. I know. I pulled an envelope from my jacket pocket. Mom, I wanted to give you this. She opened it carefully, unfolding the handwritten letter I'd spent 3 drafts perfecting. It wasn't an apology. I had nothing to apologize for. Instead, it was an explanation of who I'd become and an invitation to know this version of me, if she wanted to. Jordan, she whispered, tears gathering in her eyes. I'm so sorry. I should have protected you. I should have stood up for you. You did the best you could with what you knew then, I said. But I need you to know, I'm not looking for your approval anymore. I'm offering you a relationship with who I actually am. She nodded, clutching the letter. I'd like that very much. My phone buzzed as I left her house. A text from an unknown number. Saw the TechCrunch article about your Series A. Congratulations. Grace. Then another message, this one from Marcus. Emergency team meeting. Claire found something big in the user data. Get your ass to the office. I grinned, pocketing the phone. 3 months ago, I would have panicked at the word emergency. Now I felt the familiar thrill of a new challenge. Another problem to solve with people who believed in what we were building. I'd finally deleted my anonymous username from the mentorship forum last week. L_Hammond_mentor was still there, helping other entrepreneurs find their voices, but I no longer needed to hide behind a pseudonym. My name was Jordan Kim. I was a CEO, a friend, maybe something more to Claire. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.